back. This is Joe Bolero Jr. of the International Academy of Podcast Professionals with a Mini-Toot, a mini tutorial. This one focusing on how you can move around or manipulate your soundtrack in the multi-track session. Now, it works pretty much the same in the audio session as well, or when you export it to MP3 and you have your MP3 up, you'll be able to do the same kinds of things. The first thing we're going to look at is how do we expand this soundtrack you see I have here to make it bigger so perhaps it's easier to view. The first way we can do it is going up to this line here and just dragging it down. And you can see it opens up the soundtrack quite nicely. And you can manipulate this back and forth, make it small, make it larger, and you can do it as well with the other soundtracks. You can see how that works wonderfully right there. You can also do it by putting your clicker down here and zooming in on the amplitude. It does a very nice job right there with that button, and you can go back to the way you were by just hitting that button here. The next step you can do is to broaden this, widen it up so it's easier to see. We're going to go up to this blue bar up here in the timeline. You can see how my pointer just changed to this magnifying glass and a double-sided arrow. Hold down my left clicker and I can just move it along, and it'll broaden up, widen up that soundtrack. We can do it on the same thing on the other side and move it along like that, and it broadens it up very nicely. So if we go back and we expand and make it wider, you can see how clear that is now. If you want to grab it and move it back and forth, just put your clicker in the middle. It'll change to a hand. Hold down that left clicker, it turns into a fist, and we can just move it back and forth nicely. And we can focus right in on the area that we want to look at. See, we can make it very tight. Look at that. And we can move that back and forth quite nicely. So we can bring this all the way back and bring this side all the way back. And I wanted to point out to you that the same thing can happen if we go down here and we zoom in the timeline. You see how it's moving that? It's making it much broader. And once again, we can grab it up here with our little fist and move it back and forth. And if we want to shrink it back down, we can just hit it here and it will shrink back down. So that's a way, or two ways, or even three ways to move your timeline back and forth so that you can see your wavelength much closer, much neater, and you can see maybe some of the things that you need to do, especially when you're listening to it. You can just move this playhead and it'll go over to the area that you need, and you can do whatever you need to do, obviously, in this multi-track, or you can export it to MP3 and the functions will work well there as well. Thank you for listening, and if you have a moment, and I hope you do, visit us at intacpp.com, the International Academy of Podcast Professionals, where you can access all the resources you will need for your podcast, your webinar, or your video tutorial series. Thanks again.